Welcome. Tonight, we delve into the shadows of the heart, exploring the unsettling truths that often lie hidden beneath the surface of our most cherished emotion. This isn't about the fairy tale, it's about the stark, sometimes brutal, psychological realities of love. Prepare to confront aspects of human connection that might just change the way you see your own relationships, past, present, and future. These are the disturbing psychological facts about love. 1. The person who cares less controls the relationship. This is a truth that many find deeply uncomfortable, yet it plays out in countless relationships, often subtly, sometimes overtly, dictating the very rhythm and direction of the connection. The individual who possesses a greater degree of emotional detachment, who is less invested in the outcome, or, perhaps more accurately, has a higher tolerance for the potential loss of the relationship, inevitably wields a disproportionate amount of power. This isn't about malicious intent or a conscious desire for domination. It's a dynamic rooted in vulnerability and perceived scarcity. When one person's happiness, security, or sense of self is more deeply intertwined with the continuation and success of the relationship than the others, that person inherently surrenders a significant portion of their agency. They become the one who compromises more readily, who apologizes first, who suppresses their own needs to maintain harmony, all in an effort to secure the continued presence and affection of their partner. Consider the subtle shifts in negotiations. Who decides where to eat? Who plans the weekend activities? Who makes the bigger concessions during an argument? In relationships where this dynamic is at play, the answers often lean towards the preferences of the less invested party. The person who cares less is less afraid of conflict, less daunted by the prospect of a temporary rift, and, crucially, less terrified by the ultimate threat of separation. This psychological freedom allows them to hold their ground more firmly, knowing, consciously or unconsciously, that their partner's attachment is strong enough to bridge any gap they might create. The other partner, acutely aware of their own deeper emotional stake, often finds themselves in a position of appeasement, constantly calibrating their actions and expressions to avoid upsetting the delicate balance, or, worse, provoking a withdrawal of affection. The disturbing aspect of this fact lies in its inherent unfairness and its potential for exploitation, even if unintentional. It creates an imbalance where genuine needs and desires can be overlooked or dismissed, because one person's emotional well-being is held hostage by the other's comparative indifference. The person who cares more might find themselves constantly seeking validation, reassurance, and commitment, while the person who cares less can dole these out sparingly, inadvertently reinforcing the power dynamic. Each act of seeking and each hesitant offering further entrenches the pattern. The more one chases, the more the other can afford to retreat, knowing they will be pursued. This isn't to say that the less invested partner is necessarily cruel. Often, they are simply operating from a position of less fear. Their emotional landscape is less dramatically affected by the ebb and flow of the relationship, granting them a psychological advantage that translates directly into control. Furthermore, this dynamic can breed resentment and a profound sense of insecurity in the more invested partner. They might begin to question their own worth, feeling that they are constantly striving for something that their partner takes for granted. The anxiety of potential loss can become a constant companion, leading to hypervigilance, overthinking, and a tendency to interpret every minor slight or distant moment as a sign of impending abandonment. This heightened state of emotional vulnerability makes them even more susceptible to the control exerted by the less invested partner, creating a vicious cycle. The less invested partner, seeing their power, might not even realize they are wielding it, viewing their partner's attentiveness as a natural response to their own desirable qualities, rather than a manifestation of a deeper emotional dependency. They might interpret their partner's constant efforts as a sign of their own inherent attractiveness or value, failing to recognize the underlying fear that fuels such devotion. This psychological phenomenon is not limited to romantic relationships. It can be observed in friendships, family dynamics, and even professional settings. However, in love, where emotional stakes are often at their highest, its impact is most profound and often most destructive. It challenges the romantic ideal of two equals coming together, revealing instead a subtle but potent hierarchy based on emotional leverage. The person who is truly free to walk away, or who is perceived to be, holds the reins, guiding the relationship's trajectory with an invisible but undeniable force. Understanding this dynamic is not about advocating for caring less, but about recognizing the inherent power imbalances that can arise when emotional investments are asymmetrical, forcing us to confront the uncomfortable truth that love, far from always being a liberating force, can sometimes become a subtle form of emotional subjugation. This awareness can be a catalyst for self-reflection, prompting individuals to assess their own emotional investments and to strive for a more balanced and equitable foundation in their connections. 2. People may stay with partners they no longer love out of guilt. The notion of love as an ever-present, unwavering force is often shadowed by the chilling reality that people can remain tethered to relationships long after the flame of genuine affection has dwindled or even extinguished entirely. One of the most insidious and psychologically complex reasons for this lingering presence is guilt. This isn't the simple guilt of having done something wrong. It's a pervasive, heavy sense of responsibility and obligation towards another person, born from shared history, promises made, and the profound fear of inflicting pain. The idea of causing distress to someone who has been an integral part of one's life, especially if that person is perceived as dependent, vulnerable, or having invested significantly in the relationship, can be an almost unbearable burden. Imagine years of shared memories, intertwined lives, mutual friends, and perhaps even children. To abruptly sever such a connection feels like tearing apart a deeply woven tapestry. The individual contemplating departure, even when their heart is no longer truly in it, is often assailed by a torrent of questions. How will they cope without me? What about all the sacrifices they made? Am I a terrible person for wanting to leave? These questions are not easily dismissed. They tap into our fundamental human need for connection and our innate desire to avoid causing harm. The guilt intensifies when the partner who is no longer loved genuinely believes in the relationship, expresses their affection openly, or has built their future aspirations around the continued presence of the other. The thought of shattering their dreams, of being the architect of their heartbreak, can be a paralyzing force, trapping individuals in a gilded cage of obligation. This guilt isn't solely external. It's often internalized. People begin to feel a deep sense of moral failing for no longer experiencing love for their partner. They might chastise themselves for their changing feelings, viewing it as a personal flaw or a betrayal of their own past commitments. This self-reproach can lead to a desperate attempt to rekindle feelings that are simply no longer there, or to an even more disturbing pattern of self-sacrifice, where they suppress their own emotional needs and desires to maintain the facade of a loving relationship. The fear of being seen as the bad guy, the one who abandoned a loyal partner, can be a powerful motivator to stay, even if it means sacrificing one's own happiness and authenticity. The societal narratives surrounding commitment and loyalty often reinforce this guilt, making it even harder for individuals to prioritize their own emotional truth over the perceived needs of their partner and the expectations of their social circle. The longer the relationship has endured, the more potent this guilt becomes. The sunk cost fallacy, which we will discuss later, intertwines with guilt, creating a formidable psychological barrier to leaving. The years invested, the challenges overcome, the dreams shared, all contribute to a feeling that walking away would invalidate everything that came before, making it seem like a colossal waste. This feeling of waste is then projected onto the partner, leading to the thought, "I can't abandon them after all we've been through." This isn't love. It's a complex cocktail of historical obligation, empathetic pain, and a deep-seated fear of personal culpability for another suffering. The person staying out of guilt effectively becomes a prisoner of their own conscience, enduring an emotional void rather than confronting the difficult but ultimately necessary truth. Moreover, the partner being stayed with, though perhaps unknowingly, can contribute to this dynamic. If they express their dependence, their fear of being alone, or their deep emotional reliance, it inadvertently strengthens the guilt trip. The person wanting to leave might interpret these expressions as confirmation of their indispensable role, making the act of departure feel even more cruel and irresponsible. This creates a deeply unhealthy dynamic where one person is living a lie and the other is unknowingly relying on that deception. The disturbing truth is that staying out of guilt ultimately serves neither party. The person staying is denying themselves the chance for genuine happiness and a truly fulfilling connection, while the partner being stayed with is living in a relationship built on a foundation of emotional dishonesty, which is ultimately unsustainable and can lead to even greater pain when the truth inevitably surfaces. This insidious form of emotional imprisonment highlights how our deepest moral compass, our desire to protect others, can ironically lead us into situations that harm everyone involved, perpetuating a cycle of quiet despair rather than embracing the painful but honest path to liberation. Love often magnifies insecurities instead of fixing them. We are often told, in countless romantic narratives, that true love will heal all wounds, mend all broken pieces, and, crucially, eradicate all insecurities. The pervasive myth is that finding the one will magically imbue us with self-confidence, making us feel whole and validated. The disturbing psychological reality, however, is often precisely the opposite. Love, by its very nature, demands vulnerability. It requires us to open ourselves up, to expose our deepest fears, our past hurts, and our perceived flaws to another person. And in this very act of exposure, rather than dissolving, our insecurities often find fertile ground to flourish, becoming magnified under the intense scrutiny of a close relationship. When we are deeply in love, our partner's opinions, reactions, and perceived judgments take on an amplified significance. A casual comment, a fleeting glance, or a moment of perceived distance can be filtered through the lens of our existing insecurities, transforming into potent confirmations of our worst fears. If you secretly believe you are not attractive enough, a partner's compliment might be dismissed as mere politeness, while a moment of inattention might be interpreted as evidence that they find you unattractive. If you carry a deep-seated fear of abandonment, every late text or missed call can trigger a cascade of anxiety, leading you to believe that your partner is pulling away, confirming your deepest dread. Love doesn't erase these fears. It often provides a new, highly significant context in which they can be relentlessly tested and seemingly validated. The intimacy of a loving relationship also strips away many of the defenses we employ in less committed interactions. In casual friendships or acquaintances, we can maintain a carefully curated persona, hiding our vulnerabilities. But in love, the expectation of authenticity is paramount. This means we are encouraged or even compelled to reveal the parts of ourselves we usually keep hidden, including our insecurities. Once these raw nerves are exposed, they become highly sensitive. A partner's unintentional slight, a moment of criticism, or their own struggles and moods can be interpreted as reflections of our own inadequacy. The very person we hope will be our anchor can, through no fault of their own, become the mirror in which our insecurities are reflected back at us, larger and more menacing than before. Furthermore, the desire to be loved and accepted unconditionally can lead to a heightened awareness of anything we perceive as unlovable about ourselves. We scrutinize our own behavior, our appearance, our intelligence, our past mistakes, searching for anything that might jeopardize the affection we so desperately crave. This self-scrutiny, driven by the intense desire to maintain the love we've found, paradoxically reinforces the insecurities rather than diminishing them. Instead of feeling more secure in the knowledge that someone loves us despite our flaws, we might become hyper-aware of those flaws, constantly fearing that our partner will eventually see them too clearly and withdraw their affection. The very act of being loved can create a pressure to be perfect, or at least good enough, a pressure that inevitably highlights our imperfections. This phenomenon is particularly disturbing because it directly contradicts our romantic aspirations. We enter relationships hoping to find solace and affirmation, only to discover that the intense spotlight of intimacy can illuminate every perceived defect. It's a painful realization that external validation, even from the most loving source, cannot truly fix internal wounds. A partner can offer endless reassurance, but if the underlying insecurity stems from a deep-seated self-perception, those words often fail to penetrate. Instead, they might be heard as temporary appeasements, or even as evidence that the partner doesn't truly understand the depth of one's flaws. True healing of insecurities must come from within, through self-acceptance and inner work. Love can provide a supportive environment for this journey, but it is not a magic cure. When we mistakenly believe love should fix our insecurities, we place an unfair burden on our partner and set ourselves up for profound disappointment, further entrenching the very insecurities we hoped to escape. The mirror of love, rather than flattering us, often unflinchingly reveals the parts of ourselves we are most desperate to conceal. 4. People fall for traits they lack in themselves. There's a curious magnetism in human attraction, a pull towards qualities that reside not within us, but seemingly just beyond our grasp, embodied by another. The disturbing psychological truth is that we are often drawn to partners who possess traits we perceive as lacking in ourselves, creating a dynamic where the other person becomes a living embodiment of our unfulfilled potential or desired attributes. This isn't always about conscious self-improvement. It's often a subconscious yearning for completion, a desire to experience life through the lens of characteristics we admire but struggle to cultivate within our own personalities. Consider someone who is inherently shy and introverted, yet finds themselves irresistibly drawn to a partner who is outgoing, charismatic, and the life of every party. They might admire their partner's ability to navigate social situations with ease, to articulate their thoughts boldly, or to command attention effortlessly, qualities they secretly wish they possessed. Similarly, a highly disorganized and spontaneous individual might find themselves captivated by someone meticulously organized, punctual, and disciplined, seeing in them the structure and order they crave but find difficult to maintain. This attraction isn't merely about complementary personalities. It's about an almost aspirational desire to integrate those missing pieces into their own experience, vicariously, through their partner. The initial allure of these contrasting traits can be incredibly powerful. The partner who embodies what we lack can feel like a missing puzzle piece, completing a picture we didn't even realize was incomplete. They bring a fresh perspective, a different energy, and a set of skills that seem to effortlessly fill our perceived voids. In their presence, we might feel more balanced, more capable, or more adventurous than we are on our own. This creates an initial sense of excitement and wholeness, a feeling that this person holds the key to unlocking a more desirable version of ourselves. The disturbing element arises when this initial attraction solidifies into a long-term relationship. What begins as admiration can slowly morph into dependency, resentment, or a profound sense of inadequacy. The danger lies in the projection of our own unfulfilled desires onto our partner. We don't just admire their trait, we rely on them to be that trait for us. The shy person might expect their outgoing partner to always take the lead in social situations, never pushing them to step outside their comfort zone. The disorganized person might rely on their organized partner to manage all the practical responsibilities, never developing their own organizational skills. This creates an unhealthy dependency where one person compensates for the other's perceived deficiencies, rather than inspiring growth. Over time, the very qualities that initially attracted us can become sources of friction. The outgoing partner might grow tired of always being the social ambassador, and the organized partner might resent bearing the entire burden of practical responsibilities. Furthermore, this dynamic can exacerbate existing insecurities. The constant presence of someone embodying the traits we lack can inadvertently highlight our own perceived shortcomings. Instead of feeling complete, we might feel even more acutely aware of our shyness or disorganization, constantly comparing ourselves to their strengths. The admiration can turn into a subtle form of self-criticism, where we silently lament our inability to be more like them. This can lead to a gradual erosion of self-esteem, where our partner, through no fault of their own, becomes a constant reminder of what we aren't. The initial magnetic pull, born from a desire for wholeness, can ironically lead to a deeper sense of fragmentation if we fail to recognize that true growth comes from within, not from external compensation. The most disturbing aspect is when we mistake this aspirational attraction for true compatibility. We might believe we are deeply compatible because our differences seem to balance each other out, when in reality, we are simply drawn to an external representation of our own internal struggles. This often means we are not truly loving our partner for who they are, but for what they represent to us, a potential solution to our own perceived deficiencies. When the initial glow fades and the reality of the differences set in, the foundation built on this aspirational attraction can crumble, revealing that the qualities we admired are not always easy to live with, and that true partnership requires a deeper acceptance of both self and other beyond the superficial allure of perceived missing pieces. 5. Partners misinterpret silence as disinterest. Silence, in the complex tapestry of human communication, is rarely just an absence of sound. It is a potent, often misunderstood form of expression, laden with unspoken meanings, emotions, and intentions. In the intimate confines of a romantic relationship, the misinterpretation of silence can become a deeply disturbing psychological pitfall, frequently leading one partner to mistakenly perceive their beloved's quiet moments as a sign of disinterest, withdrawal, or even outright rejection, when the reality is often far more nuanced and benign. This misinterpretation stems from a fundamental difference in communication styles, emotional processing, and individual needs for space versus connection. Consider a scenario where one partner, perhaps after a long, stressful day at work, retreats into a period of quiet contemplation. They might be processing events, recharging their social battery, or simply enjoying a moment of internal peace. For them, this silence is not a deliberate act of exclusion, it is a necessary personal space. However, for the other partner, especially if they are someone who processes emotions externally, thrives on verbal connection, or has an underlying fear of abandonment, this silence can be deafening. It can be interpreted as a deliberate shutdown, a lack of desire to engage, or even a punitive withdrawal of affection. The absence of words is then filled with anxious thoughts and worst-case scenarios. Are they mad at me? Did I do something wrong? Are they losing interest? This misinterpretation is particularly disturbing because it creates a chasm where none truly exists, leading to a cascade of negative emotions and potentially damaging behaviors. The partner experiencing the silence as disinterest might react by becoming clingy, demanding explanations, or initiating conflict in an attempt to break the perceived emotional barrier. They might try harder to elicit a response, unknowingly putting pressure on the partner who needs space, thereby pushing them further into their quietude. This reactive behavior, born from misinterpretation, can then confirm the quiet partner's need for space, or even create actual distance where there was initially only a need for internal processing. The cycle perpetuates, fueled by a fundamental misunderstanding of each other's emotional landscape. Furthermore, the societal expectation that loving partners should always be openly communicative, constantly sharing their thoughts and feelings, exacerbates this issue. When silence occurs, it deviates from this idealized norm, triggering alarm bells. We are conditioned to believe that a truly connected couple will always be talking, always engaging, always expressing. Therefore, any prolonged period of quiet can be seen as a failure of connection rather than a natural ebb and flow of individual emotional needs. This cultural pressure adds another layer of guilt and anxiety to the partner who needs silence, making them feel like they are failing in their role as a loving companion and intensifying the misinterpretation from the other side. The disturbing element lies in how easily such a benign act can be weaponized by anxious minds, turning a moment of personal reflection into a perceived threat to the relationship. It highlights the deeply subjective nature of communication and the profound impact of our individual psychological blueprints on how we interpret our partner's actions. The partner who needs quiet might not realize the immense emotional distress their silence is causing, while the partner who misinterprets it might not recognize that their anxiety is projecting meanings onto an empty space. This lack of mutual understanding can lead to chronic resentment, a feeling of not being seen or understood, and a gradual erosion of intimacy, all stemming from something as simple and natural as a moment of quiet. Ultimately, this psychological fact underscores the critical importance of explicit communication about communication itself. Without open discussions about individual needs for space, preferred methods of processing, and how each person interprets silence, couples are left to navigate a minefield of assumptions and misinterpretations. The disturbing truth is that what one person finds comforting or necessary, another can perceive as a devastating sign of emotional withdrawal, leading to unnecessary pain and conflict in relationships that are otherwise founded on genuine affection. The unsaid in love can often speak the loudest, and sometimes it speaks a language of fear and misunderstanding. 6. People mistake intense emotions for compatibility. The initial stages of a romantic relationship are often characterized by a whirlwind of powerful emotions, exhilarating highs, passionate lows, overwhelming longing, and a sense of profound connection. This period, frequently referred to as the honeymoon phase, is intoxicating, fueled by neurochemical surges that mimic addiction. The disturbing psychological truth is that in this heightened state, people frequently mistake the sheer intensity of these emotional experiences for genuine long-term compatibility. The rush of dopamine, norepinephrine, and oxytocin creates a powerful illusion of deep connection, leading individuals to believe that the sheer force of their feelings is irrefutable proof that they are perfectly matched, destined to be together. When emotions run high, cognitive functions can be temporarily impaired. The critical, analytical parts of the brain take a back seat, allowing the emotional centers to dominate. This means that individuals might overlook glaring red flags, dismiss fundamental differences in values, or rationalize problematic behaviors, all because the emotional experience is so potent and compelling. The feeling of being swept off your feet, of experiencing a connection unlike any other, becomes the primary metric for evaluating the relationship's potential. The more intense the emotional roller coaster, the more people become that this must be real love, a sign of an extraordinary bond. When emotions run high, cognitive functions can be temporarily impaired. The critical, analytical parts of the brain take a back seat, allowing the emotional centers to dominate. This means that individuals might overlook glaring red flags, dismiss fundamental differences in values, or rationalize problematic behaviors, all because the emotional experience is so potent and compelling. The feeling of being swept off your feet, of experiencing a connection unlike any other, becomes the primary metric for evaluating the relationship's potential. The more intense the emotional roller coaster, the more people become that this must be real love, a sign of an extraordinary bond. Consider a relationship characterized by dramatic arguments followed by passionate reconciliations. The intense emotional swing from conflict to resolution, the profound relief and renewed intimacy after a fight can be incredibly addictive. The partners might interpret these dramatic cycles as evidence of their deep connection, believing that only truly compatible souls could navigate such emotional depths and emerge stronger. They might say, "We fight hard, but we love harder," mistaking the intensity of the emotional experience for the robustness of their bond. In reality, these cycles often indicate underlying communication issues, unresolved conflicts, or even unhealthy attachment patterns, rather than genuine compatibility. True compatibility often manifests in quiet understanding, mutual respect, and a shared vision, rather than a constant state of emotional upheaval. The disturbing aspect of this phenomenon is that it leads people to invest heavily in relationships that are fundamentally incompatible in the long run. The initial emotional intensity can blind them to the practical realities of shared life, differing life goals, communication breakdowns, or conflicting core values. They might mistake shared passion for shared purpose, or intense physical attraction for emotional resonance. When the initial neurochemical haze begins to dissipate and the relationship settles into a more mundane reality, the lack of true compatibility becomes painfully apparent. The emotional highs become less frequent, the lows more draining, and the underlying incompatibilities, once overshadowed by intense feelings, emerge as insurmountable obstacles. Furthermore, this mistake can be particularly damaging because it sets an unrealistic expectation for what a healthy, sustainable relationship should feel like. If intense emotional highs are equated with love and compatibility, then the natural, quieter, more stable phases of a long-term relationship might be perceived as a decline in affection or a sign that something is wrong. People might constantly chase the initial spark, mistaking the absence of constant drama or overwhelming passion for a lack of love, when in fact, genuine compatibility often thrives in a calmer, more consistent emotional landscape. This can lead to dissatisfaction with perfectly healthy relationships, or a perpetual search for the next emotional high, trapping individuals in a cycle of short-lived, passionate flings rather than fostering deep, enduring connections. Ultimately, the psychological truth is that intense emotions, while a thrilling part of the human experience, are not reliable indicators of long-term compatibility. Compatibility is built on shared values, mutual respect, effective communication, emotional intelligence, and a willingness to navigate life's challenges together, not just on the exhilarating rush of initial feelings. Mistaking emotional intensity for compatibility is a trap that can lead to profound heartbreak and wasted years, as individuals cling to the illusion of a perfect match, only to discover that the fire they so passionately tended was merely a fleeting spark, not the steady, enduring warmth of true partnership. 7. You can love someone deeply and still be miserable with them. This is perhaps one of the most heartbreaking and paradoxical truths about love, shattering the romantic ideal that if love is present, happiness must naturally follow. The disturbing psychological reality is that the profound, undeniable presence of deep affection for another human being does not automatically guarantee contentment, peace, or even a functional partnership. One can harbor an intense, genuine love for someone, a love that aches with longing, that feels foundational to one's very existence, and yet simultaneously experience profound misery, dissatisfaction, and emotional pain within the confines of that very relationship. This paradox arises from the complex interplay of individual needs, personalities, communication styles, and external circumstances that go far beyond the simple presence or absence of love. Love is a powerful emotion, a bond, a connection, but it is not a magical solution to relational dysfunction or personal unhappiness. You can love someone with every fiber of your being, recognize their inherent goodness, cherish their unique qualities, and still find that the dynamic between you generates constant friction, misunderstanding, or a deep sense of unfulfillment. The love might be pure, but the relationship itself might be toxic, unsupportive, or fundamentally misaligned with your deepest needs. Consider a scenario where two individuals deeply love each other, but one is an extreme introvert who craves solitude and quiet, while the other is a highly extroverted social butterfly who thrives on constant interaction and external stimulation. The love is real, but their fundamental needs for energy replenishment and social engagement are diametrically opposed. The introvert might feel constantly drained and overwhelmed by the extrovert's social demands, while the extrovert might feel neglected by the introvert's need for space. Both are suffering, not because of a lack of love, but because their core needs are in perpetual conflict, leading to a pervasive sense of misery despite the profound affection. Another common manifestation involves differing values or life goals. Two people might love each other passionately, but if one dreams of a nomadic life traveling the world and the other desires a stable, rooted existence with a family, their paths will inevitably diverge. The love might bind them, making the separation agonizing, but staying together would mean profound unhappiness for at least one, if not both, as they would be forced to abandon their deepest aspirations. Here, love becomes a source of pain, a cruel tether to a future that cannot truly satisfy either individual. The misery stems from the clash of fundamental life philosophies which love alone cannot bridge. The disturbing nature of this fact lies in its challenge to our most cherished romantic notions. It forces us to confront the idea that love in its purest form is not always enough. It highlights that a relationship requires more than just affection. It demands compatibility in core values, effective communication, mutual respect for individual needs, emotional intelligence, and a shared vision for the future. Without these foundational elements, even the deepest love can become a source of immense suffering. The misery can manifest as constant arguments, a pervasive feeling of being understood, a sense of emotional neglect, or a slow, agonizing erosion of one's sense of self, all while still loving the person who is inadvertently contributing to that unhappiness. This psychological truth also explains why people stay in relationships that are clearly detrimental to their well-being. They cling to the love, believing that its presence must eventually lead to happiness, or that leaving would be a betrayal of that profound connection. They rationalize the misery, attributing it to external factors or their own shortcomings, rather than acknowledging that the relationship itself, despite the love, is simply not working. The pain of leaving is often perceived as greater than the pain of staying, precisely because the love is so deep. This creates a tragic trap where individuals remain in a state of quiet despair, bound by a love that promises joy but delivers only sorrow. A poignant testament to the fact that the heart's deepest affections do not always align with the path to personal fulfillment. 8. Many people use relationships to escape loneliness. The human aversion to solitude is a powerful, primal force. We are social creatures, wired for connection, and the prospect of navigating life's vastness entirely alone can be profoundly terrifying. This deep-seated fear of loneliness, rather than a genuine desire for partnership or a deep emotional connection with a specific individual, often serves as the primary, albeit subconscious, catalyst for entering and maintaining relationships for a significant portion of the population. The disturbing psychological truth is that many people seek out or cling to romantic partners not out of an overflowing heart or a profound sense of attraction, but as a desperate antidote to the perceived emptiness of being alone, effectively using another person as a shield against their own internal void. This isn't to say that the feelings involved are entirely devoid of affection. Often, there's a genuine fondness or even a comfortable attachment. However, the foundational motivation is rooted in avoidance rather than genuine attraction, or a healthy desire for shared growth. The relationship becomes a functional necessity, a means to an end, rather than an end in itself. The presence of anyone can feel preferable to the silence of an empty home, the lack of a dinner companion, or the absence of a designated +1 for social events. The partner fills a void, providing a sense of companionship, security, and validation that temporarily assuages the gnawing fear of isolation. Consider individuals who jump from one relationship to the next with alarming speed, unable to tolerate even brief periods of singledom. As soon as one relationship ends, they are already scanning the horizon for the next potential partner, not allowing themselves the space to process emotions, learn from past experiences, or cultivate a strong sense of self-sufficiency. Their choices might be driven by the immediate availability of a partner rather than a careful assessment of compatibility or genuine connection. The primary objective is to avoid the discomfort of being alone, regardless of whether the person they choose is truly aligned with their long-term desires or values. The relationship becomes a default state, a habit, a necessary buffer against the perceived harshness of solitary existence. The disturbing aspect of this phenomenon lies in its inherent objectification of the partner. While the person seeking to escape loneliness might genuinely care for their partner, the relationship's primary function is to serve their own psychological need for companionship, rather than being a mutual exchange built on genuine desire and respect for the other's individuality. The partner becomes a placeholder, a warm body, a distraction from the internal void. This can lead to relationships that are superficial, unfulfilling, and ultimately unsatisfying for both parties. The person being used as an escape might feel a subtle but persistent sense of being less than fully seen or appreciated, sensing that their presence is valued more for what it prevents, loneliness, than for who they truly are. Furthermore, relationships born from a fear of loneliness often lack the depth and resilience of those built on genuine connection. When the initial fear subsides, or when the partner fails to perfectly fill the void, the underlying dissatisfaction can surface. The individual might realize they are still profoundly lonely, even within the relationship, because the connection isn't truly resonant. This can lead to a pervasive sense of emptiness, a feeling of trapped, or a tendency to constantly seek external validation because the internal source of happiness has not been addressed. The relationship, instead of being a source of joy, becomes a gilded cage, offering companionship but denying true fulfillment. Ultimately, this psychological truth reveals a profound vulnerability in the human psyche. The fear of loneliness is so potent that it can drive individuals into connections that are ultimately detrimental to their well-being and to the well-being of their partners. It underscores the importance of cultivating a strong sense of self and finding contentment in one's own company before seeking a partner. When relationships are built upon a foundation of avoidance rather than genuine desire, they are inherently fragile and often destined for dissatisfaction, leaving both parties in a state of quiet despair, still searching for the connection that genuine love, rather than mere companionship, promises to provide. 9. Love makes people overlook incompatibility in lifestyle and values. The intoxicating power of love, particularly in its nascent stages, possesses an almost hypnotic quality that can profoundly distort our perception of reality. One of its most disturbing psychological effects is its capacity to blind individuals to fundamental incompatibility in lifestyle and core values, dismissing them as minor quirks or challenges that can easily be overcome by the sheer force of affection. The romantic ideal suggests that love conquers all, and in this optimistic haze, significant differences that would otherwise be deal breakers are rationalized away, minimized, or simply ignored, laying a shaky foundation for what is hoped to be a lasting connection. Consider a relationship where one partner is a free-spirited, spontaneous adventurer who thrives on novelty and minimal planning, while the other is a meticulously organized, routine-oriented homebody who finds comfort in predictability and stability. In the initial flush of love, the adventurer might find the homebody's groundedness charming, a welcome contrast to their own chaotic tendencies, believing you will balance them out. The homebody, in turn, might be thrilled by the excitement, imagining that their partner will broaden their horizons and inject much-needed spontaneity into their life. The intense emotional connection makes them overlook the profound implications of these lifestyle differences: how holidays will be planned, how finances will be managed, how daily life will be structured, and what each person fundamentally needs to feel content and fulfilled. Similarly, deep-seated differences in core values, such as views on family, spirituality, politics, ambition, or the importance of personal space versus constant togetherness, can be easily dismissed when love is in full bloom. A couple might passionately love each other, but one might prioritize career advancement above all else, while the other values family time and community involvement as paramount. During the early stages, these differences might seem inconsequential, or even interesting points of discussion. We can agree to disagree, they might tell themselves, or love will find a way to bridge these gaps. The intense emotional high of being in love creates a powerful optimism, an almost magical belief that affection alone is sufficient to overcome even the most fundamental divergences in how they wish to live their lives and what they hold most dear. The disturbing nature of this phenomenon lies in the inevitable collision with reality. As the initial romantic fervor subsides and the relationship matures, these overlooked incompatibilities don't magically disappear. They fester, gradually transforming from charming differences into sources of constant friction, resentment, and profound dissatisfaction. The adventurer eventually feels stifled by the homebody's need for routine, while the homebody feels perpetually anxious and neglected by the adventurer's impulsiveness. The partner prioritizing career feels unsupported by the one who values family, and vice versa. What once seemed like minor differences become gaping chasms, revealing that love, while powerful, cannot fundamentally alter a person's core operating system or their deepest sense of purpose. This blindness to incompatibility is often a form of self-deception, driven by the intense desire for the relationship to work. People invest so much emotionally in the idea of the one and the feeling of being loved that they actively suppress or rationalize any evidence that contradicts this narrative. They might convince themselves that their partner will change, or that they themselves will adapt, rather than confront the painful truth that their fundamental needs and desires are not aligned. This leads to relationships built on a foundation of wishful thinking rather than realistic assessment, ultimately leading to heartbreak and disillusionment when the unaddressed incompatibilities inevitably surface and become insurmountable. Ultimately, love, while a beautiful and essential component of any successful relationship, is not a substitute for compatibility. It can create a powerful illusion that allows us to bypass critical evaluation, leading us down paths that are emotionally unsustainable in the long run. The disturbing truth is that the very emotion we cherish most can, ironically, be the very thing that blinds us to the realities that dictate a relationship's long-term viability, trapping individuals in connections that are destined to cause more pain than joy once the initial intoxicating spell has worn off. 10. People idealize first love more than any other. There is a unique and almost sacred space reserved in the human psyche for first love. It carries a weight, a nostalgia, and an almost mythical significance that often overshadows subsequent relationships, regardless of their depth, maturity, or ultimate success. The disturbing psychological truth is that people tend to idealize their first love far more than any other romantic connection they experience throughout their lives, imbuing it with a purity, intensity, and perfection that is often divorced from the reality of the experience itself. This idealization is a complex tapestry woven from a blend of developmental psychology, cognitive biases, and the raw, unadulterated emotional novelty of that initial romantic awakening. First love often coincides with a period of intense personal growth and discovery, adolescence or early adulthood. It's a time when everything feels new, vibrant, and incredibly significant. The emotions experienced during a first love are often the most intense and overwhelming simply because they are unprecedented. There's no prior frame of reference for the dizzying highs, the crushing lows, the profound longing, or the exhilarating intimacy. This novelty amplifies every sensation, making the experience feel uniquely profound and unforgettable. It's not just love, it's the first time feeling love, and that makes all the difference. The brain, awash in new neurochemicals and experiences, encodes these memories with a special intensity, tagging them as exceptionally important. Furthermore, first love often occurs before the accumulation of significant life experience and the development of a fully formed sense of self. Expectations are often unburdened by past heartbreak, cynicism, or the complexities of adult life. There's a naive optimism, a belief in infinite possibilities, and an unshakable faith in the power of love to conquer all. This innocence contributes to the idealization. The relationship is remembered through the lens of pure, untainted hope rather than the often messy and imperfect reality. Subsequent relationships, by contrast, are filtered through the accumulated wisdom of past mistakes, the scars of heartbreak, and the practicalities of adult responsibilities, making them seem less pure or magical in comparison. The disturbing aspect of this idealization is its insidious effect on future relationships. The first love often becomes an unconscious benchmark against all subsequent partners and connections are measured. This benchmark is inherently flawed because it's based on an idealized memory, not a realistic assessment. No future relationship, no matter how healthy, mature, or fulfilling, can ever replicate the firstness of that initial experience. It can never recapture the unique blend of innocence, novelty, and intense self-discovery that defined that period. Consequently, later partners might constantly fall short of this idealized phantom, leading to dissatisfaction, a perpetual sense of something missing, or an inability to fully commit to the present. The ghost of first love can haunt current relationships, making it difficult to fully appreciate the unique qualities and genuine connection offered by a new partner. Moreover, this idealization can lead to a distorted view of what love should feel like. If first love was characterized by dramatic highs and lows, intense passion, and a sense of all-consuming obsession, individuals might unconsciously seek to replicate that intensity, mistaking it for genuine connection, as we discussed earlier. They might dismiss quieter, more stable, and ultimately healthier relationships as boring or not real love because they don't match the idealized intensity of their first romantic experience. This can lead to a cycle of dissatisfaction as they constantly chase a feeling that is rooted more in novelty and developmental stage than in the sustainable dynamics of a mature partnership. Ultimately, the psychological truth is that while first love is undoubtedly a powerful and formative experience, its enduring idealization is often a cognitive trick of memory and emotion. It's a reflection of our own growth and the unique circumstances of our initial romantic awakening, rather than an objective assessment of the relationship's inherent perfection. The disturbing implication is that this powerful nostalgic lens can prevent us from fully embracing and appreciating the present, trapping us in a romantic past that, while beautiful in memory, may never have been as perfect as we now remember it, and which, by its very nature, can never be truly replicated. 11. Arguments about small things are often about bigger emotional issues. In the daily ebb and flow of a committed relationship, it's common to encounter minor disagreements, a misplaced item, a forgotten chore, or a difference in opinion about a trivial matter. What appears on the surface as a petty squabble over something inconsequential often belies a far deeper, more disturbing psychological truth. These seemingly small arguments are rarely about the superficial topic at hand. Instead, they serve as proxies, erupting points for much larger, unresolved emotional issues, unmet needs, or underlying resentments that have been simmering beneath the surface. The triviality of the stated conflict is merely a convenient, low-stakes trigger for the eruption of profound, unspoken pain. Consider a couple arguing furiously about the exact way the dishwasher should be loaded. On the surface, it seems absurd. Surely two adults can find a mutually agreeable method for stacking plates. But the intensity of the argument, the disproportionate emotional response, indicates that the dishwasher is merely a stand-in. What might truly be at stake is a feeling of being unheard, disrespected, or unappreciated. Perhaps one partner feels that their efforts around the house are consistently overlooked, or that their partner dismisses their opinions as trivial. The wrong way to load the dishwasher becomes symbolic of a broader pattern of disrespect, a perceived lack of consideration, or an imbalance in shared responsibilities. The anger isn't about the dishes, it's about the erosion of trust, the feeling of being taken for granted, or the deep-seated belief that their partner doesn't truly value their perspective. Similarly, a heated debate about being 5 minutes late for dinner might not be about punctuality at all. It could be a manifestation of a deeper fear of abandonment, a feeling of not being prioritized, or a chronic sense of being let down. The 5 minutes of lateness triggers an underlying insecurity, reminding one partner of countless other times they felt unimportant or secondary. The small infraction becomes a catalyst for expressing a larger narrative of neglect, or a pattern of perceived disrespect that has accumulated over time. The words exchanged might focus on the clock, but the emotional energy is directed at a much more significant, unspoken grievance. The disturbing aspect of this dynamic is its insidious nature. Because the real issues are not being directly addressed, they remain unresolved, continuing to fester and resurface through new, equally trivial proxies. The couple might resolve the dishwasher argument only to find themselves embroiled in another intense fight the next day about the thermostat setting, the choice of movie, or the way the toothpaste tube is squeezed. Each small argument is a symptom, not the disease itself. This constant cycle of superficial conflict creates a pervasive sense of frustration, exhaustion, and misunderstanding, as both partners feel perpetually at odds without truly understanding the root cause of their discord. They might genuinely believe they are fighting about minor issues, failing to connect the dots to the deeper emotional wounds. Furthermore, avoiding the larger emotional issues often stems from a fear of vulnerability or a lack of communication skills. It can be incredibly difficult to articulate deep-seated fears, resentments, or unmet needs directly. It requires courage, self-awareness, and a willingness to be emotionally exposed. Therefore, it's often easier, albeit less effective, to channel that emotional energy into a safe argument about something inconsequential. The problem is that while these small arguments provide an outlet for frustration, they do not offer a pathway to genuine resolution, leaving the core issues untouched and the relationship in a perpetual state of low-grade emotional conflict. Ultimately, this psychological truth reveals that the surface-level skirmishes in a relationship are often distress signals, desperate attempts to communicate deeper, more significant pain points that are too daunting or too vulnerable to express directly. The disturbing implication is that couples can spend years embroiled in these proxy battles, slowly eroding their connection and fostering chronic resentment, all while failing to address the fundamental emotional wounds that are truly tearing them apart. Recognizing this dynamic is the first step towards peeling back the layers of triviality and bravely confronting the profound, often uncomfortable, emotional truths that truly lie at the heart of their disagreements. 12. People stay in unfulfilling relationships due to sunk cost fallacy. The human mind is remarkably susceptible to cognitive biases, and one of the most powerful and disturbing in the realm of relationships is the sunk cost fallacy.
This psychological phenomenon describes our tendency to continue investing resources, time, effort, emotion, and even money into a failing endeavor simply because we have already invested so much. In the context of love, it means people often remain trapped in relationships that are clearly unfulfilling, unhappy, or even detrimental to their well-being, not because they genuinely desire to stay, but because the thought of wasting the years, experiences, and sacrifices already made feels too painful and unrecoverable. Imagine a relationship that has endured for a decade. The initial passion has long faded, communication has broken down, and both partners feel a pervasive sense of emptiness and resentment. They might rarely laugh together, share intimate moments, or support each other's dreams. Yet when the thought of ending it arises, a powerful internal voice whispers, "But what about all those years? All the holidays, the milestones, the shared struggles? If I leave now, it will all have been for nothing." This feeling of wasted investment becomes an almost insurmountable barrier to making a rational decision. The focus shifts from the potential for future happiness to the perceived loss of past efforts, trapping individuals in a cycle of quiet desperation. The deeper the investment, the stronger the grip of the sunk cost fallacy. If a couple has bought a house together, started a family, built a shared social circle, or even merged their finances, the tangible and intangible costs of disentanglement appear astronomical. The emotional labor of rebuilding a life, the financial complexities of separation, and the social upheaval of informing friends and family all contribute to the overwhelming feeling that it's too late to turn back now. The perceived value of the past investment outweighs the current misery and the potential for future happiness, leading to a decision that is fundamentally irrational from a forward-looking perspective.
The disturbing aspect of this fallacy is its capacity to condemn individuals to a state of prolonged unhappiness. It leads people to actively choose continued suffering over the perceived loss of past investment. They might tell themselves, "I've put too much into this to give up now," or "It would be a shame to throw away all those years." This internal narrative prevents them from acknowledging that the past investment is already gone, regardless of future action. Staying in the relationship doesn't magically validate the past. It merely adds more sunk cost to an already failing venture, digging the hole deeper. The only way to truly waste the past is to allow it to dictate a miserable future. Furthermore, this cognitive bias often intertwines with other psychological factors like guilt, fear of loneliness, and societal pressure, creating an even stronger trap. The guilt of abandoning a partner who also has invested, the terror of facing life alone after years of partnership, and the societal expectation of enduring commitment all reinforce the irrational decision to stay. People become prisoners of their own history, unable to break free from a narrative of continuous investment, even when the returns are overwhelmingly negative. They sacrifice their present and future well-being on the altar of a past that cannot be changed. Ultimately, the psychological truth of the sunk cost fallacy in love reveals a profound human vulnerability, our difficulty in letting go of what is already lost. It highlights how our desire to avoid the feeling of waste can lead us to make choices that are deeply detrimental to our long-term happiness and fulfillment. The disturbing implication is that countless individuals are living lives of quiet resignation, trapped in unfulfilling relationships, not because of love, but because they cannot bear the psychological burden of admitting that their past investments, however significant, are not a guarantee of future joy, and that sometimes the bravest act is to walk away, acknowledging the loss, and opening the door to a future where genuine happiness is still possible. 13. Love makes people betray their personal boundaries. Boundaries are the invisible lines that define us, protecting our sense of self, our emotional well-being, and our individual autonomy. They communicate what we are and are not willing to tolerate in our interactions with others.
The disturbing psychological truth about love is its profound capacity to erode these essential boundaries, leading individuals to betray their own core needs, values, and limits in the name of affection, harmony, or the desperate desire to maintain a connection. What begins as a subtle compromise can gradually escalate into a full-scale surrender of personal integrity, leaving individuals feeling resentful, depleted, and utterly lost within the relationship. In the initial stages of a relationship, driven by intense infatuation and a powerful desire for connection, people are often highly motivated to please their partner and avoid conflict. This can manifest as a willingness to overlook minor boundary crossings, such as a partner consistently being late, making decisions without consultation, or making light of a personal sensitivity. The thought process often goes, "It's not that big of a deal," or "I don't want to rock the boat." However, each unaddressed boundary violation subtly signals to the partner that the boundary is in fact permeable and that the individual's limits are flexible. This inadvertently trains the partner to continue pushing, as there are no clear consequences. The betrayal of personal boundaries is particularly disturbing because it often happens incrementally, almost imperceptibly. It's a slow chipping away at one's sense of self, rather than a sudden, dramatic capitulation. A person might initially feel uncomfortable with their partner reading their private messages, but dismiss it as a sign of their partner's deep affection. Over time, this discomfort might turn into a normalized invasion of privacy. Or, someone who values their alone time might gradually sacrifice it entirely to accommodate a partner's need for constant togetherness, feeling guilty if they express a desire for solitude. The fear of disappointing their partner, of being perceived as unloving, or of triggering conflict becomes a more powerful motivator than the need to protect their own space and energy. Furthermore, the romantic ideal often promotes the idea of two becoming one, blurring the lines of individuality. While a healthy merging of lives is part of a committed relationship, this ideal can be misinterpreted as a call to completely dissolve personal boundaries. People might believe that loving someone deeply means sacrificing their own needs for the sake of the relationship, or that setting boundaries is inherently unloving or selfish. This misconception is incredibly damaging, as it leads individuals to suppress their authentic selves, to silence their own voices, and to tolerate behaviors that are fundamentally disrespectful or harmful. The love, which should be a source of strength and affirmation, ironically becomes the very force that undermines their self-worth and autonomy. The consequences of consistently betraying personal boundaries are profound and far-reaching. Over time, it leads to deep-seated resentment towards the partner, who is perceived as taking advantage, even if they were never explicitly told where the boundaries lay. It also leads to a loss of self-respect and a diminished sense of identity. The individual might wake up one day feeling like a stranger in their own life, realizing they no longer know who they are outside of the relationship, or what their own needs and desires truly are. The constant suppression of their authentic self can manifest as anxiety, depression, or a pervasive sense of emptiness. The love that once felt liberating now feels like a cage built by their own compromises. Ultimately, this psychological truth reveals a dark side of love's influence, its capacity to compel us to abandon our most fundamental self-preservation instincts. The disturbing implication is that in our fervent desire to connect and be loved, we can inadvertently dismantle the very structures that keep us whole, leading to relationships where one or both partners become shadows of their former selves, all in the name of a love that, ironically, requires the preservation of individual integrity to truly flourish. Reclaiming those lost boundaries, though painful, is often the only path back to self-respect and a truly equitable partnership.
14. Many relationships are held together by fear. Beneath the veneer of commitment, shared history, and mutual affection, a chilling psychological truth often lurks. A significant number of relationships, far from being sustained by genuine love and desire, are held together primarily by fear. This isn't the fear of a partner's physical retaliation, but a complex web of anxieties: fear of loneliness, fear of the unknown, fear of societal judgment, fear of financial instability, or the fear of being unable to find another partner. This insidious fear acts as a powerful, invisible glue, keeping individuals tethered to connections that have long ceased to be fulfilling, joyful, or even healthy. The most pervasive of these fears is often the fear of loneliness. As we previously discussed, the human aversion to solitude is profound. The thought of returning to an empty house, navigating social events alone, or simply facing the quiet introspection that comes with singledom can be terrifying. This fear can be so potent that it makes an unfulfilling or even miserable relationship seem preferable to the perceived emptiness of being alone. The partner, however unsatisfying, becomes a necessary buffer against this existential dread, a warm body that signals to the world and to oneself that one is not truly alone. This isn't love, it's a desperate attempt to avoid a deeply uncomfortable emotional state. Another powerful fear is the fear of the unknown. Leaving a long-term relationship, even a bad one, means stepping into a completely uncharted territory. It means dismantling a life built with another person, confronting the daunting prospect of starting over, and facing the uncertainty of what the future holds. The familiar, even painful, can feel safer than the unpredictable. The devil you know, as the saying goes, is often preferred to the devil you don't. This fear of the unknown can paralyze individuals, keeping them locked in a predictable, albeit unhappy, routine, rather than taking the terrifying leap into a potentially better but uncertain future. Societal judgment also plays a significant role. The stigma associated with divorce, separation, or even simply being single past a certain age can be immense. Friends, family, and cultural norms often exert subtle pressure to maintain a relationship, even if it's clearly dysfunctional. The fear of being seen as a failure, of disappointing loved ones, or of having to explain oneself to a judgmental world can be a powerful deterrent to leaving. People might choose to maintain the facade of a happy couple to avoid uncomfortable questions or the perceived shame of a failed relationship, effectively living a lie to appease external expectations. Financial fears are another major factor. The practical realities of shared assets, mortgages, and dependence can make separation seem financially ruinous. The fear of losing economic stability, of having to downsize, or of facing the daunting prospect of single-income living can trap individuals in relationships where they feel financially dependent or where the cost of leaving seems too high. This is particularly true in situations where one partner is the primary earner, leaving the other feeling economically vulnerable and therefore compelled to stay. The disturbing aspect of relationships held together by fear is their inherent lack of authenticity and joy. They are relationships of necessity, not desire. Both partners, consciously or unconsciously, often sense this underlying fear, leading to a pervasive sense of resentment, emotional stagnation, and unfulfillment. The presence of fear means that decisions are often made from a place of avoidance rather than genuine connection, leading to a slow erosion of intimacy and trust. The relationship becomes a cage, albeit one that offers perceived safety, rather than a space for growth and mutual flourishing, rather than the silent tyranny of unspoken dread. Ultimately, this psychological truth reveals a profound human weakness: our willingness to trade potential happiness and authenticity for the illusion of security. The disturbing implication is that many individuals spend significant portions of their lives in unions that are devoid of genuine love and passion, sustained only by a complex tapestry of anxieties. Recognizing that fear, not love, is the primary binding agent in a relationship is a painful but crucial step towards reclaiming one's autonomy and seeking connections that are built on a foundation of genuine desire, respect, and mutual joy, rather than the silent tyranny of unspoken dread. 15.
People justify their partner's bad behavior to protect their self-image. In the intricate dance of a romantic relationship, our perception of our partner is inextricably linked to our perception of ourselves. When we choose someone, especially for a long-term commitment, that choice reflects on our judgment, our values, and our self-worth. This creates a powerful, often subconscious psychological imperative to protect that self-image, leading to a disturbing phenomenon. People will often go to extraordinary lengths to justify, rationalize, or minimize their partner's bad or even abusive behavior, not necessarily to protect the partner, but primarily to protect their own ego and the narrative they've constructed about their relationship and themselves. Consider a person who has invested deeply in a relationship, perhaps telling friends and family how wonderful their partner is, how perfect their connection seems. If that partner then exhibits controlling, disrespectful, or unreliable behavior, it creates a cognitive dissonance. To acknowledge the partner's flaws directly would be to implicitly acknowledge a flaw in their own judgment, a mistake in their choice, or a failure in their ability to select a healthy partner. This can be a devastating blow to one's self-esteem. To avoid this painful self-reproach, the mind instinctively seeks to resolve the dissonance by altering the perception of the problematic behavior. Justification can take many forms. A partner's anger might be excused as passion or stress. Their controlling tendencies might be reframed as caring too much or being protective. Their unreliability might be attributed to being busy or having a lot on their plate. Even outright disrespect can be rationalized away with phrases like, "they didn't mean it," "they had a bad day," or "I must have provoked them." The blame is often shifted, either to external circumstances or, disturbingly, back onto oneself, rather than confronting the uncomfortable truth that the partner's actions are genuinely problematic. This self-blame further protects the ego. If I am the problem, then I can change, and the relationship can be fixed, thus preserving the initial good choice narrative.
The deeper the investment, and the more public the declaration of love, the stronger the need for justification becomes. If one has moved across the country for a partner, given up career opportunities, or alienated friends who expressed concerns, the psychological cost of admitting that the partner is genuinely flawed and the relationship is unhealthy becomes immense. The ego clings desperately to the idea that the sacrifice was worth it, that the choice was sound, and that the relationship is ultimately good, even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. This is a powerful form of self-preservation, albeit one that is deeply damaging in the long run. The disturbing aspect of this behavior is its contribution to the perpetuation of unhealthy or abusive relationship cycles. By constantly justifying or minimizing bad behavior, the individual inadvertently enables it, sending a message that such actions are acceptable. This not only harms the individual doing the justifying, who slowly loses their sense of reality and self-worth, but also prevents the problematic partner from facing the consequences of their actions and potentially seeking change. The relationship becomes a closed system of denial, where the truth is sacrificed on the altar of a protected self-image. Furthermore, this psychological defense mechanism can alienate friends and family who try to point out the problematic behavior. Because acknowledging the truth would threaten the individual's self-perception, they might become defensive, dismissive, or even hostile towards those who offer an outside perspective. This isolation further entrenches them in the relationship, making it even harder to break free from the cycle of justification and self-deception. Ultimately, this psychological truth reveals a painful vulnerability in the human ego, our desperate need to be right, to have made good choices, and to maintain a positive self-image, even at the expense of our own well-being. The disturbing implication is that love, rather than fostering clear-eyed judgment, can become a powerful catalyst for self-deception, leading individuals to become complicit in their own suffering by actively rationalizing away the very behaviors that are causing them profound pain, all to protect the fragile narrative of a perfect choice. 16. Humans bond faster with people who cause emotional highs and lows.
The human brain, in its relentless pursuit of stimulation and novelty, often mistakes intensity for intimacy and dramatic emotional swings for profound connection. This leads to a disturbing psychological truth. We tend to bond more quickly and intensely with individuals who introduce significant emotional highs and lows into our lives, rather than those who offer stable, consistent, and predictable affection. The roller coaster of passion, conflict, and reconciliation, while often chaotic and ultimately unsustainable, creates a powerful neurochemical cocktail that can be profoundly addictive, forging what feels like an unbreakable bond, even if it's fundamentally unhealthy. Consider the intoxicating allure of a stormy relationship, one characterized by intense arguments followed by passionate makeup sessions, periods of exhilarating connection interspersed with frustrating distance, or moments of overwhelming affection followed by confusing withdrawal. Each of these dramatic shifts triggers a cascade of neurochemicals in the brain. The initial high of connection releases dopamine, creating feelings of pleasure and reward. The subsequent low of conflict or perceived rejection triggers stress hormones like cortisol, creating anxiety and a sense of threat. When the relationship then shifts back to a high, e.g. reconciliation, the brain experiences a profound sense of relief, releasing endorphins and oxytocin, which reinforce feelings of bonding and attachment. This cycle of tension and release, fear and relief, creates a powerful emotional loop that can be incredibly compelling. This phenomenon is often linked to intermittent reinforcement, a psychological principle where rewards are given inconsistently. This pattern is known to create strong and persistent behaviors, like gambling addiction. In relationships, when affection, validation, or attention is not consistently available, but given intermittently, it heightens the anticipation and makes the reward feel even more potent when it finally arrives. The partner who is sometimes warm and loving and sometimes distant or critical creates an unpredictable environment that keeps the other person constantly striving for the highs, making them more deeply invested and bonded. The brain interprets the effort required to achieve these highs as evidence of the relationship's profound importance. The disturbing aspect of this truth is that it often leads people to confuse drama with depth. They might believe that the intensity of their emotional experience, the sheer force of their feelings, is indicative of a truly profound and special connection, when in reality, it's often a sign of instability, insecurity, or even unhealthy attachment patterns. A stable, consistent, and peaceful relationship, while offering genuine security and happiness, might feel boring or less passionate in comparison to the intoxicating highs and lows of a more volatile dynamic. This can lead individuals to gravitate towards partners who provide this emotional roller coaster, inadvertently perpetuating a cycle of instability in their romantic lives. Furthermore, this type of bonding can be particularly detrimental because it often overshadows genuine compatibility and healthy communication. The focus shifts from building a solid foundation of mutual respect, trust, and shared values to chasing the next emotional peak or navigating the latest crisis. The highs become so addictive that individuals overlook the destructive nature of the lows, rationalizing them as part of the passion or proof of our deep connection. This prevents the development of true emotional intimacy, which thrives in an environment of safety, predictability, and consistent care, not in a constant state of emotional turbulence. Ultimately, this psychological truth reveals a vulnerability in our emotional wiring, our tendency to equate intense emotional arousal with meaningful connection. The disturbing implication is that we can become deeply bonded to individuals who are actually causing us significant distress, mistaking the neurochemical rush of a dramatic relationship for genuine love and compatibility. Recognizing this dynamic is crucial for breaking free from cycles of unhealthy attachment and for cultivating relationships that are built on a foundation of stable affection, mutual respect, and genuine emotional safety, rather than the fleeting, addictive thrill of emotional chaos.
17. Love can make people tolerate disrespect. One of the most insidious and heartbreaking psychological effects of deep love is its capacity to compel individuals to tolerate, rationalize, and even accept profound disrespect from their partners. What begins as a seemingly minor slight can, over time, escalate into a pattern of dismissiveness, belittling, neglect, or outright contempt, all endured under the powerful, often blinding, influence of affection. The disturbing truth is that the very emotion that is supposed to uplift and affirm us can, paradoxically, become the chain that binds us to interactions that systematically erode our self-worth and dignity. This tolerance for disrespect often stems from a complex interplay of factors. In the early stages of love, there's a strong desire to see the best in our partner, to give them the benefit of the doubt, and to minimize their flaws. A disrespectful comment might be dismissed as a bad mood, a slip of the tongue, or an isolated incident. The intensity of the emotional connection can overshadow the discomfort caused by the disrespect, making it easier to rationalize it away. They don't mean it, we tell ourselves, or they love me, so it can't be that bad. The love becomes a filter through which all behavior is interpreted, often favorably, even when it is objectively harmful. As the relationship deepens and the emotional investment grows, the stakes of confronting disrespect become higher. To challenge a partner's behavior might risk conflict, withdrawal, or even the potential loss of the relationship, which feels unbearable given the depth of love. This fear of loss can be a powerful motivator to stay silent, to internalize the pain, and to minimize the impact of the disrespect. The individual might convince themselves that their partner's love is worth the occasional slight, or that their own reaction is an overreaction. They might even begin to believe, subtly, that they deserve the disrespect, especially if it's coupled with intermittent affection and reassurance, creating a confusing and manipulative dynamic. The disturbing aspect of this phenomenon is the slow, corrosive effect it has on an individual's self-esteem and sense of identity. Each act of tolerated disrespect chips away at their self-worth, making them question their own value and their right to be treated with dignity. They might stop expressing their needs, silence their opinions, or change their behavior to avoid provoking their partner, effectively shrinking their authentic self to maintain the peace. The love that once felt empowering now feels like a prison, where the price of connection is the sacrifice of self-respect. This leads to a pervasive sense of emptiness, resentment, and a profound loss of self, all while still loving the person who is causing the pain. Furthermore, this tolerance can inadvertently enable the disrespectful behavior. When boundaries are not enforced and disrespect is allowed to persist, the partner learns that such behavior is acceptable within the relationship. This can lead to an escalation of disrespect, as the partner, perhaps unconsciously, pushes the boundaries further, testing the limits of what will be tolerated. The cycle of disrespect and tolerance becomes entrenched, making it increasingly difficult to break free, as both individuals have become accustomed to the unhealthy dynamic. The person enduring the disrespect might feel too weak, too dependent, or too emotionally invested to challenge the status quo. Ultimately, this psychological truth reveals a dark paradox of love, its ability to make us vulnerable to profound harm from the very people we cherish most. The disturbing implication is that the depth of our affection can blind us to behaviors that are fundamentally damaging, leading us to sacrifice our dignity and well-being for the sake of a connection that is, ironically, undermining our very essence. Recognizing that love, however strong, should never be a justification for tolerating disrespect is a painful but essential step towards reclaiming one's self-worth and demanding a relationship built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affirmation. True love elevates, it does not diminish. 18. People often fall in love with who they want to be.
The intricate dance of attraction and bonding is often less about truly seeing and appreciating another person for who they authentically are, and more about projecting our own aspirations, unfulfilled desires, and idealized self-images onto them. The disturbing psychological truth is that we frequently fall in love not with the actual individual standing before us, but with a reflection of who we want to be or who we wish we could become. The partner becomes a living embodiment of our own potential, our hidden strengths, or the missing pieces of our desired identity, creating an illusion of profound connection that is rooted more in self-projection than in genuine recognition of the other. Consider an individual who secretly yearns for a more adventurous, spontaneous life, but is held back by fear and routine. They might become deeply attracted to a partner who embodies these very qualities: a free spirit, a traveler, someone unburdened by conventional expectations. The attraction isn't just admiration, it's an unconscious belief that by associating with this person, by loving them, they too will somehow absorb these desired traits, or at least experience life through their partner's lens. The partner becomes a vehicle for their own unfulfilled aspirations, a mirror reflecting a more desirable version of themselves. Similarly, someone struggling with self-doubt might be drawn to a confident, successful, and articulate partner. They might believe that being with such a person will elevate their own status, bolster their self-esteem, or provide the validation they crave. The love they feel is intertwined with a hope for transformation, a belief that this person holds the key to unlocking their own potential for greatness. This is a subtle but powerful form of self-love, projected onto another. The disturbing aspect of this phenomenon lies in its inherent objectification of the partner. The individual is not truly seen for their unique complexities, flaws, and authentic self, but rather for the role they play in fulfilling the other's internal narrative of self-improvement. When the partner inevitably deviates from this idealized projection, when the adventurer wants to settle down, or the confident individual reveals their own insecurity, the illusion shatters, leading to profound disappointment and disillusionment. The love, which was built on a foundation of aspiration, can quickly turn into resentment when the partner fails to perpetually embody the desired self-image.
Furthermore, this dynamic creates an immense, unfair burden on the partner. They are unknowingly expected to fulfill a role that is not truly their own, to constantly mirror back a desired self-image that may not align with their own authentic being. This can lead to a feeling of not being truly loved for who they are, but for what they represent. It can also stifle their own growth and authenticity, as they might unconsciously try to maintain the projected image to sustain the love they receive. The relationship becomes a performance rather than a genuine connection between two autonomous individuals. This psychological truth also makes it difficult to cultivate true intimacy, which requires vulnerability and the acceptance of each other's authentic selves, flaws and all. If one is constantly seeking to see their own aspirations reflected in their partner, they might struggle to truly connect with the messy, imperfect reality of another human being. The focus remains inward on the self's desires, rather than outward on the partner's intrinsic worth. Ultimately, this disturbing psychological fact reveals that love is not always a selfless act of appreciation for another, but can sometimes be a deeply self-serving projection of our own unfulfilled potential. It highlights the narcissistic tendencies inherent in human attraction, where the pursuit of a partner is, in part, a pursuit of a better self. Recognizing this dynamic is crucial for fostering relationships built on genuine acceptance and appreciation of who a person is, rather than who we wish they were for our own self-actualization, allowing for a connection that celebrates authenticity over idealized aspiration. 19. Emotional dependency is often mistaken for deep love. In the lexicon of love, certain terms are often used interchangeably, blurring crucial distinctions and leading to profound misunderstandings about the nature of healthy connection.
One of the most pervasive and disturbing psychological errors is the conflation of emotional dependency with deep, passionate love. What often appears on the surface as an intense, all-consuming bond, a testament to unwavering affection, is in reality a precarious structure built on a profound psychological need for external validation, reassurance, and emotional regulation, rather than a robust foundation of mutual respect, autonomy, and genuine appreciation for the other's independent spirit. Emotional dependency manifests when one or both partners rely excessively on the other for their emotional well-being, sense of self-worth, and happiness. They might feel incomplete or utterly lost without their partner, experiencing intense anxiety or despair at the thought of separation. This reliance is often expressed through constant communication, an inability to make decisions independently, a need for perpetual reassurance, or an expectation that the partner should fulfill all their emotional needs. When this dynamic is present, the intensity of these needs and the accompanying fear of loss are often misinterpreted as evidence of an extraordinary, profound love. "I can't live without you" becomes a declaration of deep love, rather than a red flag signaling an unhealthy attachment. Consider a relationship where one partner feels a constant, overwhelming need to be with the other, to know their every move, and to receive continuous affirmation of their affection. Any perceived distance or independence from the partner triggers immense anxiety and distress. This intense emotional reaction, the profound fear of abandonment, and the desperate yearning for connection are then rationalized as "how much I love them." The partner experiencing this dependency genuinely believes their feelings are a testament to an unparalleled love, failing to recognize that the intensity stems from their own unmet internal needs and insecurities rather than a healthy, reciprocal bond. The disturbing aspect of mistaking emotional dependency for deep love lies in its inherent unhealthiness and its potential for mutual destruction. A relationship built on dependency is fundamentally imbalanced. The dependent partner places an immense burden on the other, expecting them to be the sole source of their happiness and emotional stability. This is an unsustainable expectation that can quickly lead to burnout, resentment, and a feeling of being suffocated by the independent partner. The independent partner, in turn, might feel trapped, responsible for another's emotional state, and unable to pursue their own interests or needs without triggering guilt or anxiety in their dependent partner. The relationship becomes a crutch, preventing both individuals from fully realizing their potential. This psychological error also explains why people remain in relationships that are clearly detrimental. The fear of losing the source of their emotional stability, how unhealthy, is so profound that they will tolerate disrespect, unhappiness, or even abuse, rationalizing it as the price of a deep love. They cannot distinguish between the pain of genuine heartbreak and the terror of losing their emotional crutch. Ultimately, this disturbing psychological truth forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that not all intense emotional connections are healthy or indicative of true love. The overwhelming feelings associated with emotional dependency are often a cry for help from an unhealed self, a desperate attempt to fill an internal void with external validation. Recognizing this distinction is crucial for fostering relationships that are genuinely loving, respectful, and mutually empowering, rather than those that inadvertently trap individuals in a cycle of codependent reliance, mistaking a desperate grasp for a profound embrace. Most people would rather stay in a wrong relationship than face being alone. This final disturbing psychological fact encapsulates many of the preceding points, drawing them together into a stark and often heartbreaking conclusion about human behavior in love. Despite the misery, the disrespect, the unfulfillment, and the erosion of self, a pervasive and powerful fear drives most individuals to choose the known discomfort of a wrong relationship over the terrifying uncertainty and perceived emptiness of being alone.
The fear of being alone is a multifaceted beast. It encompasses the primal fear of isolation, the societal pressure to be coupled, the anxiety of re-entering the dating world, the fear of financial instability, and the emotional pain of dismantling a shared life. For many, the prospect of facing these challenges single-handedly feels overwhelmingly daunting, a seemingly insurmountable mountain. Therefore, even a relationship that offers little joy, considerable pain, or a constant sense of compromise becomes a psychological refuge, a familiar cage that is, for many, preferable to the perceived wilderness of singledom. Consider the cumulative weight of years invested, as discussed with the sunk cost fallacy. To leave means acknowledging that those years, those efforts, those sacrifices might have been for nothing. It means admitting a personal failure, not just to oneself, but to a wider social circle. This internal and external pressure to maintain the status quo, to make it work, even when it clearly isn't, becomes an almost unbearable burden, pushing individuals to cling to the wreckage rather than stepping on to solid ground alone. The illusion of partnership, however fractured, offers a perverse sense of security. Furthermore, the romantic narratives we are inundated with often paint a bleak picture of singledom, particularly for those past a certain age. The idea that one might never find love again, that they might be destined to live out their days alone, can be a terrifying prospect. This fear-mongering, often unintentional, from cultural messages and even well-meaning friends and family, reinforces the belief that any relationship, even a bad one, is better than no relationship at all. It creates a powerful incentive to cling to what is known, however detrimental, rather than risking the unknown. The disturbing aspect of this fact is the profound self-betrayal it entails. By choosing to stay in a wrong relationship, individuals actively deny themselves the opportunity for genuine happiness, authentic connection, and personal growth. They sacrifice their emotional well-being, their dreams, and often their very sense of self, all to avoid the temporary discomfort and uncertainty of being alone. This choice leads to a life of quiet resignation, where resentment festers, joy is scarce, and the potential for a truly fulfilling partnership is indefinitely postponed. The energy expended on maintaining a dying relationship could instead be channeled into self-discovery, healing, and building a life that truly resonates with one's authentic desires. This psychological truth also highlights the difference between true love and mere companionship. A wrong relationship provides companionship, a shared history, and a buffer against loneliness, but it rarely provides genuine emotional intimacy, mutual respect, or shared purpose. By settling for the former out of fear, individuals miss out on the transformative power of the latter. They remain in a state of arrested development, unable to learn the crucial lessons that come from periods of solitude, self-reflection, and independent growth. Ultimately, this final disturbing fact about love forces us to confront a fundamental human weakness, our vulnerability to fear, and its capacity to overshadow our deepest desires for happiness and authenticity. It reveals that the pursuit of connection, when driven by fear rather than genuine desire, can lead us into profound self-deception and prolonged suffering. Recognizing that the courage to face being alone is often the prerequisite for finding a truly right relationship or for simply building a fulfilling life for oneself is a painful but liberating truth. The choice to stay in a wrong relationship out of fear is not a testament to love, but a poignant reminder of how deeply we can be imprisoned by our own anxieties, sacrificing the potential for true joy on the altar of perceived safety. These psychological truths about love are not meant to diminish its beauty or its power. Rather, they are an invitation to look beneath the surface, to understand the complex forces at play, and to approach our most profound human connections with greater awareness, honesty, and self-compassion. The disturbing realities are not a condemnation of love itself, but a call to build relationships that are truly conscious, authentic, and ultimately more fulfilling.
thank you for joining us on this journey into the unsettling depths of the heart.